welcome to the program, Jason Bermas, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Grab Elwood. I don't know why I'm feeling very morning DJ today. Jason, traffic out in the fives. We're gonna just go where I'm at Toyota of Glendale, giving out some political vigilante koozies. That's what I feel like. I feel like we should be more morning DJ-ish. So let's make sure we can hear you, my friend. Give us some levels.
You got it. Let's talk about the UFO thing for a second. You got some good stuff right in that very beginning, right? So I would encourage people to go check out Annie Jacobson's book, Area 51, among all of her other books, which are also amazing because she's done them on DARPA and she's done them on Project Paperclip, and they all really intertwine. The way the Area 51 comes to being out of this post-nuclear bomb world and the Central Intelligence Agency and new propulsion systems. Because you got to understand, Graham, the latest rocket that we've ever developed is the Saturn V from Wernher von Braun. So I am really of the belief set, especially with the amount that I've looked into this. And I looked into this, I'm talking about from the time I was 10. You're about my age. Remember Read the Book, the Time Life series? The DJ, Read the Book. We had those when I was a kid. And aside from the goofy stuff, the UFO stuff always was very, very intriguing to me. And, back when it wasn't covered as much, this idea of, alien visitors, grays, the X-Files was big back then. And then eventually the idea of ancient aliens or ancient astronauts. I remember before the History Channel series, there's actually a late 90s documentary that was based on Von Daniken's work. And I've sat down with William Henry years ago. I've sat down with Jordan Maxwell. And I just got to be honest, the vast majority of what I think goes on there is disinformation. I encourage people to go check out Mirage Men, an amazing documentary you can watch on YouTube for free to show you how the Pentagon does it. And the cover-up of other technologies, other propulsion systems outside of space rockets. That's all a scam, man. You think Elon Musk is going to the moon or he's going to Mars with rockets? No, he's putting up Starlink the same time that DARPA's putting up their satellite figure, and he's pushing Neuralink. He knows he's not going to Mars. I mean, even the Russians have called him out for weaponizing space. He's not terraforming Mars or the moon or any of that Johnny nonsense. This goes back even to the Star Wars program in the 80s that did not fail through Reagan. So I encourage people to just look up everything I just said there and then start making some informed decisions on why the History Channel turned from a program that told you about banking takeovers, World War I, the Nazis, into 90% ancient aliens and ghosts.
Oh, interesting. Because I remember when I was a real little kid, there was a TV show called, Operation Blue Book or whatever, about the, and it was the whole program was to debunk actual alien interaction, which made me always go, wait a minute. So they have interacted with us, and the government wants us to just pretend they didn't, or say, oh, it was a weather balloon, or some hillbilly in a boat saw a shooting star and lost, freaked out or whatever. But what you're saying is, so what is your personal? It sounds like you've done way more research. I'm not that big into the UFO world, so I'm very curious to hear about this. I believe that there has to be intelligent life in the universe, because if the human race on this dumb planet is the smartest beings in the universe, wow, are we in trouble? Then this universe that we're the trailer park of the universe. I mean, we're the Earth is the Florida of the whole universe. So I hope there's people smarter than the human race that just murders each other for money and fuel and and greed. Like, I hope there's not an alien race of horrific sex traffickers like the ruling class on this planet. So what is your personal belief based on, it sounds like a fair amount of research that you've done?
Yeah, one of the other guys I sat down with for a long time that did great work on this was Jim Mars before he passed. I met Jim several times. I love Jim Mars. Rest in peace, brother. I would say this: anything is probable, Graham. And in infinite space, it would be, I guess, how do I say this? almost impossible for us to be the only intelligent beings out there. Now, that being said, everything is kind of at a wacky point right now, right? What is mainline science telling us about artificial intelligence and quantum computing that's bringing that? Well, it's reaching into the multiverse, this infinite verse that we've been told about through fiction for decade upon decade, where every single outcome to the fraction minutia happens and then multiplies out. So that kind of takes away the idea that, interdimensional travel is anything more than just everything happening in a simulation. Simulation theory is another thing they're putting out there. Musk has talked about the possibility of us living in a hologram and space being a hologram. I don't know what's up, but I will say I do believe the vast majority of this stuff is terrestrial. For instance, again, if we're going to believe in ancient aliens, is that much different than believing in angels and demons? I just think that a lot of people take everything to almost a religious level, right? Because even when we get into the idea of the creation of man and the absence of intelligent design or the possibility of God or any of that, what do we get with science? We get this magical bang that somehow we can read through radiation waves that started life in a multiverse or a universe or whatever out of nothing. So no matter who you are or what you are, in my opinion, if you hold those beliefs as definites, you believe some goofy stuff, like with that big controversy, for instance, Graham, with America's frontline doctors and this woman, who's from Africa, who believes in demon semen and these, beings raping people. The only thing I'm really concerned about there is, did she treat 350 people with hydroxychloroquine or not? Because are we all of a sudden going to discount every Mormon doctor out there because he believes in Joseph Smith and magic golden tablets? My point is that when we get to those beliefs,
Christian that believes that Jesus turned water into wine. I mean,
all of it, right? All of it. At some level, you go from the natural to the supernatural, from the explainable to the unexplainable. And, somewhere in there, we all have these beliefs. And I really do feel like, especially with aliens, with the push, man, you remember as a kid, E.T. was the biggest thing out there. If you were a little bit more adult, Steven Spielberg had Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Mm-hmm. And, these are people that have built media empires that have obviously interacted with intelligence. I mean, you look at his World War II movies, Schindler's List, Saving Private Ryan, they're extremely well done, but only tell a certain sector of history. And they get you very emotional about it. So I would just warn people, especially with that and the disclosure. Now we have off-world craft. Again, they haven't publicly disclosed a military aircraft since the stealth bomber during the Gulf War. Think about what your telephone and your television looked like during the Gulf War and where we are today. Do you believe that? Take a step back. What do you really believe? Do you believe we haven't had a new rocket since literally the 60s? Do you believe that there are no other propulsion systems? I mean, I don't believe those things.
Hold on, Jason. It's not like we outspend the next 10 countries combined on military. So it's not like we've been pouring all this money into it. So I kind of believe that, we just, our military program is just barely getting by. We're this mom and pop that needs to have a GoFundMe every couple of days. That's why they spent $1.5 trillion on the F-35, which again, we don't know much about it, as you just said. And oh man, but we are supposed to believe all these billionaires, Elon Musk and Bill Gates. They're just fun-loving nerds, right? They're just fun-loving nerds. They're good, solid people, right? Isn't that what we're all supposed to believe in the media outlets that they all own? So
well, let's talk about that for a second, because those guys are really kind of just the social climbers in the predator class. They had affluent parents that were somewhere in the levels, kind of like if you went back in time and you got to Prescott Bush, right? Mm-hmm. Prescott Bush, his parents were well off, but they weren't great, but they got him into Yale. And he was able to get into Skull and Bones. And from Skull and Bones, he married into another Skull and Bones family. And then all of a sudden, he's in Averell Harriman banking and he's cutting deals with Nazis. And all of a sudden, he comes up and his son comes up, George H.W. Bush. These dynasties are often social climbing predator class. That's what you see with Bill Gates. Okay. And when you see something like a Google, right, to kind of bring this back into space today, they updated their terms of service, and it is so in line with Pentagon propaganda and counterintelligence, the document behind me, because it now bans you from discussing content. Basically, we will remove content that contains hacked information, the disclosure of which may interfere with the democratic process, such as elections and censuses. So basically, they're banning any type of information that does not come from official sources. They've already pushed the authoritative sources line, etc. Well, unfortunately for people, especially the MAGA crowd that wants to believe that Donald Trump's going to save the day and, he's fighting the deep state. Well, you go to their own national counterintelligence strategy, Graham, and let's type it in.
Okay.
It's not news because they have the same line as Google. They want to treat hacktivists, leaktivists, and public disclosure organizations as threats like the Lebanese Hezbollah, look what just happened in Lebanon, ISIS and Al-Qaeda, Cuba, Iran, North Korea. They've already put this stuff on paper. So you get to what is YouTube, what is Google, what is Alphabet, the alpha of these organizations, right? They all fit like a pyramid. They have their little front companies and LLCs they move people around in. But when we get to space, when we get to quantum computing, when we get to artificial intelligence, Google is the government. They are in bed with NASA on AI production. Okay. What is AI? The Pentagon, DARPA, they've openly said they want full spectrum dominance in this. So no matter who the president is, no matter who gets selected, because obviously Zombie Joe, he couldn't run a Wendy's right now, right? He could probably put them in the ground in 3 weeks, if that. Let's be 100% honest. And Kamala Harris was somebody that nobody wanted, but she is of that social predatory nature where she slept her way to the top through Willie Brown, another one of these globalist guys, former mayor of San Francisco, guy who got a call on the morning of 9/11 not to get on the plane, Bohemian Grove Club member. That's a fact, Jack. Yes, he got a call on the morning of 9/11 not to fly that day. Reported all throughout the media, and he was confronted on it, and he tried to deny it. But you can look it up. It's the real deal. So Kamala Harris, she's almost as much of an empty vessel as Joe, only she's still, visually, verbally, mentally there. And she's cutthroat, man. She wants that position.
Well, yeah, she's got more billionaire donors than anybody. We could go on and on about her as the district attorney in San Francisco who, wouldn't prosecute pedophile priests and wouldn't put their names publicly when they did, get arrested. It's not to mention the, Steve Mnuchin donated to her campaign. She becomes attorney general. She has 1,000 documents that are clearly showing mortgage fraud, which is a felony. She could have put Mnuchin and Soros in jail for running One West Bank. Doesn't? Oh, weird. Then they donate to her senatorial campaign. She becomes senator. She votes to confirm Steve Mnuchin as treasurer. These are all wacky coincidences, Jason. You're just a tinfoil hat guy. That's what you do. You and you're crazy. What kind of a guy wears a t-shirt in front of a screen? What kind of a guy does that on YouTube? But let's get back here. You bring up a great point about Google and about and Oliver Stone, by the way, was just on RT talking about the military-industrial complex, and he said it's not going to matter if it's Trump or Biden. It won't, because the war machine is going to keep going. The only reason they didn't impeach Trump in his first year on the emollients clause is because he didn't keep to his campaign promise of getting us out of these wars. Had he done that, they would have been like, "Oh, you're done. You don't want to do war. You're gone. You are gone. Just ask the Kennedys. You're gone." So going back to Google, though, there's a fantastic book. Maybe you're aware of it, but if anyone in our audience who isn't, it's when WikiLeaks met Google, and it basically, Julian Assange talks about and goes in the history of Google and how they've been working hand in glove with CIA since at least 2011, if not earlier, because the CIA went, "Oh, wait a minute, Google we want back end access to all their stuff because they can give us all this data and surveil people." But I want to just let's come to a close on this UFO subject at least. So many you bring up such great points of how can we trust anybody with regard to this? How can we honestly sit there and they're going to tell us they haven't come up with a new rocket? They haven't put any money into this. They've just shut down the space program. They just, no, that's not what we want to do anymore, which is like, they want to dominate everything. And who knows what, and I don't want to get into the, like, there's aliens among, lizard people. I don't want to play that thing, but like, you bring up excellent facts and points here. So, I mean, when all this pandemic, the way they were shutting it down and everything, I was like, okay, maybe this is, a legitimate thing, or like, I was like, anything's possible. If spaceships fucking rose out of the Pacific Ocean, and I would have gone, oh, okay, got it. So that's what this was all about. Like, I don't trust anyone in power for any reason. So based on all this information, do you think we have had contact, or our government, or is at least aware of contact with alien life forms? I mean, or did we know they were going to attack us, and that's what this is all about? Or, I mean, what is it?
Graham, I got to tell you, man, again, I've looked at this forever, and I've seen the Admiral Byrd stuff where supposedly on paper he flew into the center of the earth and, saw these. If you don't know about Admiral Byrd, I mean, that's talking about turn of the century stuff, and flying into the hollow earth, just crazy stuff where those Nordic type aliens that supposedly Hitler believed in, right? If you've watched those old History Channel specials, even before the Ancient Alien stuff, they always talk about this super race and the Vril Society, etc. I don't know, man. It's very hard for me, because the other thing that's very bizarre in history and untalked about and not pushed as much is the occultic nature of it, right? Even when you get to Christianity and how paganism was kind of pushed into that religion, obviously, Christmas being one of them, the date changed, the Christmas tree, the ornaments, etc., moving in, you can see that culturally. That a lot of these people that gravitate towards power do some weird stuff, right? They are into, the Marina Abramovic spirit cooking artwork. They are into Aleister Crowley, right? People seek power, even on lower levels. The average person that goes into these type of fraternities with Freemasonry, there's occultism there. There's different type of ritualistic behavior there, and it only exudes, right? We talked about Skull and Bones. Mm-hmm. That's a very small organization. I just did a watch along just earlier this week of my film Invisible Empire, which also includes somebody, I think it's almost a decade and a half ago now, who got on the top of the tomb and filmed one of the rituals. And, they're all dressed up and they've got mock sacrifices going, and the devil equals death and death equals the devil. It's all on camera. I own 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of the actual Bohemian Grove Annals, which was canceled for the first time ever this year with coronavirus. It started in 1872. And it's filled with occultic stuff, and them before even having the owl god, which they look to because it sees in the night and it's a predator, right? They used to have a giant Buddha statue where they would do a druidic ritual there. So instead of the cremation of care, they had something very similar. Why are these things going on throughout history, and why haven't we shed them as a society? And why is it that a lot of these people like to speak in hermetic symbolism? I'll never forget, back in the day, we're talking over 10 years ago, during the first financial crisis, 2008, 2009, somebody asked Pelosi a pertinent question about the banking system and what was going on. And she kind of smirked up and she goes, "It sounds like the common people want the secrets to the temple." It's like, what the hell are you talking about? The secrets to the temple. So I'm just saying, when we get to aliens, when we get to mysticism, I've read a lot of it. Manly P. Hall, America's Secret Doctrine. I've sat down with a lot of these people. And again, who's to say what these things are if they actually have a physical manifestation in the world? If you're telling me you're from the, there's those that believe that Lucifer's an actual being, right? You go that deep, like Lucifer's an action. He's living on the Dog Star, the Twin Star Sirius. He's in that system. I don't know. I'll tell you this. I never promoted lizard people and the Anunnaki even before it was hip. That doesn't mean I discarded everything David Icke said in The Biggest Secret, because, you know, he was one of the first guys to point to these royal pedophile rings, right? And we know about Lord Mountbatten, and the FBI knew about him back in the 50s. So, you know, we live in a very bizarro world. And I think 2020 has kind of exuded that even more, right, Graham? Where you kind of do wake up and it's like, I'm in the twilight zone every day. So what's next? What is possible? And unfortunately, when you get down to the nitty gritty, like you said, the military industrial complex, the thing that Oliver Stone's talking about is they want all of us to be Julian Assange. They don't want any of us to be able to publish any documentation that can challenge any of the predator class in any nation state. And you talked about a book on Google. I encourage people to check this out. It's by Eric Schmidt, the founder, and Jared Cohen, another executive at Google, another CFR member. It's The New Digital Age. And they talk about Assange in this. And in 2013, they were talking about how the United States would want to go after people like Assange and bring them here and prosecute them heavily while promoting leaks that went against their enemies, namely China, right? And this is such a real issue, and that's why I work with the Action for Assange crew. I was actually out in D.C. During those first hearings with them, because nobody in the mainstream was covering it, right? And on top of that, it was right before this outbreak. I remember it was right before CPAC. Alex Jones ended up being in D.C., and I had my reunion with him just kind of out of nowhere. But they were there to talk about Roger Stone, who, by the way, his sentence was commuted. I made them talk about Julian Assange. I got news for you. Julian's still being tortured. He's still being muzzled. Okay, these hearings are happening in September, and it is the Trump administration, Rick Grenell and Bill Barr, that are behind these indictments and want him here just as much as anybody, Graham.
Oh, of course. I mean, that's the thing that's always so funny to me is just the QAnon crowd or whatever thinking that, you know, Trump is and it's just like, you're talking about William Barr. You're talking about a guy that's done nothing with Epstein, and we'll get into Ghislaine Maxwell in a little bit, but like, no, I mean, it's just fascinating to me that people think there's still these two parties, or there's somehow a difference between them, which is just it's insane to me. It is insane to listen to. So, all right, well, where can people, before we get on to the next subject, just give people some, like, who are maybe new to this UFO and the intelligence community and the military industrial complex side, and give them just some sort of entry level 101 stuff to get more knowledgeable on this.
Sure. And again, I would say that Annie Jacobson, you check out any of her interviews on anything. You got to understand, for instance, Paperclip, which is kind of like preceding and into this. Project Paperclip post-World War II brings a bunch of these Nazi scientists over for NASA, but it also brings over a bunch of their intelligence officers to create from the OSS the Central Intelligence Agency. You know who else they used? Skull and Bones. Okay, Prescott Bush was so involved in that, and that's why I keep going back into him. So when you look at this and you look at the fights and the nature of, you know, suppressing technology, think about legitimately how well the United States did suppress nuclear technology to other world powers. For a long time, it was really us and the Soviet Union. We're talking about a couple decades. That's more than impressive, maybe even 3 decades. So that shows you the power of disinformation. And then there's a film, again, I cannot push it enough, because Mirage Men takes you into the seat of somebody who was seeing this phenomenon, right? He was seeing these things. He went to the U.S. military, and they saw an opportunity to exploit him because he had money, and for him to promote their propaganda that what he was seeing was not a military project, but in fact, alien beings. You know, and so this guy thought he was a super secret spy guy working with the military on disclosure. You know, people like Stephen Greer, who are meeting with Rockefellers, cannot be trusted. I have watched Stephen Greer for 30 years, from his rise to fame when he was just doing Larry King shows when there was 15 stations on television, Graham. And I got to tell you, I've never trusted the guy. I still don't trust the guy. I think, you know, and maybe someone will give me flack for this, but I think, you know, he's a guy with a family. He's a doctor, but I think he's also a closeted homosexual. And why does that matter? Well, if you're closeted, you know, they often use that against you. In other words, you don't want something to come out about your personal life. And I mean, you watch his first movie that he put out. It was, I'm not sure if it was Disclosure. I've watched them all. But his bodyguard, if him and his bodyguard are not romantically involved, I will eat a raw salmon here on air. Bone and all. I'm just saying, the guy doesn't seem honest. I remember way back in the day when he was confronted about 9/11 being a false flag operation, you know, when people were actually asking hard questions, his eyes lit up. He's like, well, you know, he didn't want to talk about it. And then later on, he puts it in his film, right? He also put the Bohemian Grove in his film too. So, you know, I guess basic level, guys, don't just believe everything you see on the History Channel. Do your own research. I've read through the Blue Book documents. Okay. I've read through the, man, what are they? The Majestic 12 documents. Do you know about those, Graham?
Mm-mm.
So the Majestic 12 documents are probably a hoax. But if you want like the super sci-fi aliens visited, crashed in Roswell, Einstein new version, and Eisenhower was involved, there's these set of documents, Magic 12, supposedly a clearance within the military, that tells that story. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of stuff out there. I mean, you really have to spend a ton of stuff, but it gives, if you think about it, if you've got, just like now, you got an invisible enemy, right? People are wearing masks and Zoom meetings in Wisconsin right now, Graham. Mm-hmm. And this enemy never has to go away. You never actually have to see it, right? You just need some push on the television for that fear, fear, fear. And I think we've seen something very, very similar with the majority of what goes on with UFOs and aliens.
Interesting. All right, Jason Bermas. Yeah, thanks for bringing all that. It's valid. And somebody being in the closet, there's nothing bad or wrong with that, but you're right. They will use whatever they can against you, and whatever, if you don't want to talk about something, or you're keeping something in your life hidden, they will use it against you. They will use it as leverage.
Hey everybody, like, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell notification button and the subscribe button, even if you've done it before, because they're unsubscribing, many of you, every day. Watch the ads all the way through. If you click skip ad, I don't get paid. Also, support us at patreon.com/Graham Elwood or rockfin.com/Graham Elwood. Rockfin.com is a blockchain cryptocurrency platform. All my videos are on Rockfin ad-free. Thanks for watching.